The biggest and the strongest value we have in our granting process is that we require homeowners to be there. They cannot just Airbnb and be gone. They have to be an owner-occupied residence, and I think that's our strongest law. So that's basically my concern. The more and more people come in and they have their concerns and they relay them to the ZBA, if we understand their concerns but can't address their concerns, it really just starts to look bad, and it makes people believe that we are not actually listening to them. Yes, Keith?
Are you suggesting it should be conditional use instead of
I
special
don't know.
exception?
I don't know where I believe
Okay.
it sits, to be honest. Yes.
On the owner occupancy thing, so if you had a detached accessory dwelling unit and the homeowners lived in the main home, you could rent out the detached as a Airbnb, is that what you're saying?
It's anything. I mean, no matter what, if you're using it for Airbnb, not for any kind of long-term rental, specifically Airbnb, the property must be owner-occupied.
Right.
Well, again, is the property considered the entire property or the building?
The entire property.
There could be two buildings on the property, one of them with the
As
owner.
far as I understand in regards to the ruling, if you own two separate properties side by side,
No, the same property, but with an ADU.
so the owner-occupant goes with the actual physical land, not the structures.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And to clarify this for the record, the current procedure is that Airbnb rental, requests to be able to rent Airbnbs and similar is a special exception.
Special exception, correct. And it's a 3 criteria instead of the 5 criteria. Yeah, it's very purposeful. I like the ruling. It felt more in place to see how things were going, and it might be time to revisit where it belongs. And maybe we just say, you know what, we don't have anything better, so this is where it belongs. That's fine, I understand that. But a little bit more thought on maybe where we're at as it matures with the town and how it's being used. Because they are increasing. We've always seen more and more and more over the past 3 years.
So,
Yes.
Well, and what, statistically, I know you have probably a lot of data if there haven't been a lot of them requested, but what are the things that are being, what are the concerns? Because in general, if you try to bring it back and have it all of a sudden be a CU, but I mean, if it's just mushy, it doesn't.
9 times out of 10, it comes back to where typical people who come in opposed to it, they struggle to separate the difference between an Airbnb and a student rental. They think, oh, well, yeah, what about parties, parking? And at the end of the day, I mean, I understand the concerns about parking, but we can't tell people that you don't have the right to have more than 3 cars in your driveway. I mean, if they can fit it without widening the driveway, that's their prerogative. I try to, how I lead the ZBA, and I know the word freedom is tossed around. I'm a big freedom of rights person for your land. I believe that you have the freedom to do what you want to do with your land until you start impeding on somebody else's freedoms. And that's where I start my deliberation in my head and break it down. And when people come in, I don't see where they're losing. I don't see where they are losing their freedom. How to quantify that into the actual special exception questions that we have to ask. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me, I can't see you.
Sorry, M. Friedrichs. I know
Oh.
that's far. Well, actually, Ms. I don't.
Ms. Scar.
Yep, that's fine. Sorry, I'm
Take a moment.
mix. I'm saying Ms. Mix. Z, X, what letter am I on?
Okay.
So, I, having served on the planning board as several people on the council have, I think, have seen similar things, and of course, Councilor Bubar is on the ZBA as well. I wonder if there could be, there needs to be some more sort of public education, and whether Audrey could be of help in that, or the planning department. So whether that means maybe coming up with frequently asked questions to help people understand what are the sorts of things that can be addressed by the ZBA and what cannot. Handouts printed at every meeting, so then if people come in, they can grab one then if they didn't see it on the website, and that might help just kind of people, because I think a lot of times people don't understand how land use works.
Sure.
And it does get very emotional, and I think whether that sits with the ZBA or the planning board, you see that same thing. And as Councilor Grant brought up, whenever it's, the more ambiguity that is introduced into the process, whether that is conditional use or whatnot, oftentimes the more confused everyone involved in the process becomes. And so I just wonder about maybe creating some kind of tasking our planning department with helping you to create some educational materials that could make your life easier, because I think that would be a very
Public
important
outreach
role.
is obviously, get the horse to drink the water at the river. One of the best ways to reach our citizens. Absolutely, I totally agree with that. The concerns that I do foresee coming is if we ever started to have to turn some Airbnbs away versus not, it becomes like, well, why do they get to do it? But because it becomes I just feel like there's a little bit too much gray area for the ZBA because we have to be fairly defined, right? When we look to give relief to a citizen, we really have to order toward why we're doing this, why we think that you did not do that. And a lot of times it's kind of like, well, and when you have a lot of, back and forth, like, well, I don't agree with this, but I'm not sure if I connect, it starts to get concerning, and the amount of times nowadays where we are having to go to court is just costing the citizens more and more money, and I really try to make sure that everything is very cut and dry. I know most things aren't, but I try to make sure they're cut and dry. It's always my obligation. The one thing that I have started doing, which I don't mind doing, I don't like to do it, I've started to really kind of hone in when we allow the citizens to come and speak, like, we need to remember that you need to speak to criteria, not feelings. I understand that your feelings, and I really do. I mean, we're all sinking hundreds of thousands of dollars into property, so your investment is yours, and you need to protect it. But it's really hard to really give the people the comfort that they're looking for when they have concerns.
So would you be asking for it just to be an allowed use then?
Again, I don't know. Allowed use, so a lot of the places that I've been on, specifically in the town that I work for in Scarborough, Maine, it's a by right use with a whole set of what you can and can't do, and that's that. It's bottom line, and we've had, I think we all work with people for inappropriate use of their code. So. But I think at the end of the day, we could be getting there, but that would take a lot more thought and probably a little bit more broadening of our actual code. Yes.
Have you discussed this issue with the planning board at all?
I don't even know who's on the thing.
Okay, well, the chair of the planning board is in the audience.
Oh, okay.
And
He's over there,
Oh.
Paul Rasmussen.
Yeah, does Airbnb even go to the planning board?
But yeah, it would be a change to the zoning ordinance, and those usually start with the planning board.
Okay.
That was going to be my question, like, where does this go? Where do we start
I think
generating?
that's the great
Do not bring
discussion.
it to the
is
planning board.
was
We
what
have
is
so
the
much.
appropriate path for
Our
our
list is
town?
this long already. I mean, I think, sharing the concerns with the planning board, and if someone from the ZBA could present to the planning board would be really important. If that's difficult to do, then certainly using that an ordinance rewrite could be proposed. One, it can come from the town council. Another, it can come from the planning board, and third, it can come from kind of a private citizen, which could be ZBA as well. And then either way, the planning board has to look at it and hear it at some point, and then the town council has to look at it and hear it before passing it, and the town council would be the body that turns it into law. Did I miss anything there, Todd? Okay.
Or sends it back to the planning board.
Right, I mean, if things are changed at different points, that may go through various iterations of that, but.
I tend to try to leave it to citizens or the council. It's my place to enforce the laws in the books, not to propose new ones. I just bring what I'm seeing. So those are my concerns. If they're your concerns too, great. If it's not, so be it.
All right.
Any other questions? Great, thank you, Jim. Also, we do have some golden members who are having trouble making it from time to time because they're enjoying their lives, which I'm so glad they are. We also have one of our alternates who is planning on leaving. It's possible that we could be losing one of our full-time members here eventually as well. And I know that our other alternate, with his current lifestyle, is not interested at all in going to be a full member. He's happy being an alternate. So we need to start putting out the feelers again for new members.
How many are you looking for?
I would say 1 to 2 more would be fantastic.
2 more?
Yeah, if we lose a full-time active member, and we lose our other alternate, we'd be one short for a full-time member, and we'd have one alternate having to be a full-time member with no alternates after that. So I typically like to have 2 alternates at all times to make it confident that we're gonna have a full board.
Sure.
Great, thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Have a
Thank
great day.
you.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much. Okay. So it sounds like just from what was just going, the conversation just happened, that this is something that will go to the planning board, do you think?
That's up to our chair to decide if it should be an agenda item or not.
And the chair just left to
So.
speak with.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll probably hear about
So-
that in a
It's probably-
couple
it will-
of weeks.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Right.
there's a lot of discussion, though, at
Oh,
the
yeah.
planning board over whether something should be conditional use or special.
absolutely.
Special exception, the
Right, right.
conditional use is very broad in the review.
Right,
Well,
Yeah.
those are 2, but the third one is allowed use.
Or,
Sure.
or
Right,
an
right.
unallowed
Yeah.
use.
right,
Yeah, sure.
but allowed or prohibited don't have public hearings associated with them. I think that was part of why the decision was made to put this under special
Correct.
exception, was so that there would be some form of public hearing.
Right. I mean, I think the planning board, very long list of things that they're addressing this year, and we have to hear from the entire planning board. But our list for items for this year is already quite long, and I don't know how adding this, how feasible it would be to add to this, but that's a discussion for the planning board to have as a whole, and I think also in terms of the concerns that the planning board has seen with procedural things, conditional use has been a big generator of lawsuits that the planning board is not eager to add more of. And so that would be another discussion as well. And, maybe there are places where it belongs. I think, I think the planning board would have to have a larger discussion, but I just kind of anticipate that this would not be something that the planning board would really want to take on, but that's just.
It's been a while, but as I remember it, prior to the ordinance, there were a number of people renting rooms on Airbnb that got a number of people upset. Need to deal with this, very similar to the whole solar tracker issue. We're to the planning board. And really, there was a long time spent on rental units.
Yeah, and I mean, Cardin was really driving that, I think
Yeah.
probably a lot of you would remember that. And it was thoroughly discussed for like I don't know if it took a year or
Long
not, but it was a long time.
time.
But I think I would like to read it sort of after being dug into it.
Yeah.
I think in terms of a review, it's like if they're not getting very many anyway, it's gonna be low on the priority list. And
Okay.
so if they're only getting requests for, accessory dwelling unit, 3 a year or less, I mean, how much pain is it really causing? But if it's super unclear in one spot, then it might
Right.
just be a quick fix. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to read it again. It's been a long time since.
You think, or what do you?
I don't know,
what do
I
you
think I
Don't
have
know.
to read it. I just don't remember enough about it.
Okay. All right.
I think it would be a good idea to leave it as a special exception instead of a conditional use.
I remember it was complicated, and it took like 3 years. There was sort of on again, off again in terms of the review. And I think the most critical part of it was the owner-occupied aspect.
Absolutely.
But I would suggest we sort of put this in the hopper with a host of other issues, and it's great that it's been flagged, and when the chance arises, we can address it when there's
Yeah.
time. And
Yep, very
Yeah.
good. That's great, okay.
But as Heather said, there's only been 3 since the ordinance was enacted, or at least this year, so
Okay.
why?
could be.
And
That-
there may be quite a demand for it, but it may be a demand that the town doesn't want to satisfy.
Right. Or it's also possible that some people are scared off because it is a special exception,
Sure.
even though that's less scary than having to go through a conditional use application.
Yeah. Well, and I think as Todd said, the owner occupied is kind of probably one of the big deals, because that prevents you from putting a fraternity house up as an Airbnb for the summer.
Yep,
Right.
sure.
Or having investors buy houses to use as Airbnbs, which is a problem in
Very
some
common,
communities and so far not Durham.
Yeah.
Yeah, or
And it
Loud
encourages
parties, you know.
more of those units to be leased out as long-term leases. So
Right.
Durham has, and has a actually quite exceptionally high rate nationally. This is from the state's planning office. So we have a very high number of ADUs, and currently all of those, you know, unless you have a special exception for an Airbnb, those when leased have to be leased long-term housing, rental housing, and that adds significant housing stock to what is a critical housing stock issue. So turning, or, you know, loosening up those rules and enabling any of those units to flip to be Airbnbs would run up against what we're trying to achieve elsewhere in terms of adding housing stock.
I'm glad that Mike brought it up. It sounds like something to, as Todd said, put on that list. All right. No unfinished business, I know it. Approval of the minutes from May 6, 2024. Anybody have any substantive changes?
No, I had some minor corrections.
Okay. Then in that case, I move that we minutes as written.
Second?
All those in favor? All those opposed? Looks unanimous. All right. So thank you for sending, any of you that sent in comments, things to look for. All right. All right, what's on the docket next here? Round table. Yes? Did I miss something? No?
No, you're
Yes, sir.
right.
Yeah,
It is
we
round
are.
table.
So before we start, I have some comments. I wrote them out only because I didn't want to leave anything out, so we can certainly discuss my comments, but I wanted to start with these before we dig into the round table. Ideas and/or raise questions with the council and Todd. Some questions or concerns may come from email correspondence that's been shared with the council by Todd. Many of the emails he shares are for our information and to keep us informed of things that are happening in town or comments from townspeople and others. They are for our information only. It is very tempting to respond with a comment or an opinion. However, unless an email is directed to us for our comments, we should wait to discuss an item until our next town council meeting in order to adhere to the right to know practices. If you have information to share with Todd, such as news articles you have come across, that's fine. If you have questions or concerns, then you may want to give Todd and the town council a heads up that you would like to learn more about or comment on the item or topic at the next roundtable. Keeping our comments inside our meetings will also require less of Todd's time. As written on our website, as a matter of principle as well as legal obligation, the town of Durham seeks to embrace openness in the conduct of public business. The preamble of RSA 91A reads, "Openness in the conduct of public business is essential to a democratic society. The purpose of this chapter is to ensure both the greatest possible public access to the actions, discussions, and records of all public bodies and their accountability to the people." So I'm just trying to make sure that we keep anything where we're sharing an opinion in this body when we're together, especially if we're responding to an email from Todd, literally, therefore our information. But obviously, if he needs some information, he'll put out that request, but just a reminder that we're trying to keep the conversations in here. And I don't think people just talk about what happened in the committees they've been to, but really it's an opportunity to talk about anything that you want to bring up. So just a reminder that that's how we should conduct business. Questions, comments?
Are you telling us not to reply all?
I'm not saying not to reply all. It's a question of just replying at all, because when you reply, he's going to share. We get everything that he
Now-
gets. So if you write back to Todd, it automatically gets shared. For the most part. Go ahead, you wanna explain
If I
that?
respond, it
Yes.
goes back to everybody, and
Right.
sometimes it gets tricky if I try to be mindful of the amount of back and forth. So if I send a note and one counselor responds, and then I respond, and then another counselor responds, and I respond to that. Every time I respond, it's going to all, and then it starts to feel like a conversation. So I just, so this past week I talked with Sally and said, I've gotten to the point I don't feel comfortable responding because it's going to tip into a conversation. So I think that's,
Yeah.
So save it to here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Think before you hit the reply button.
right.
Or
But
is
as long
it
as you're just
also-
like saying, hey, good job, or like, that's
Yeah,
what I think
yeah,
too,
that's-
or something along those lines, that's not, as well as potentially precluding other members that you're
Right.
warning us off of. Am I
Right.
understanding that correctly?
So if I share my opinion with Todd, and then he shares with the council,
Mhm.
as soon as somebody else responds,
Then
it
it's
starts to
it
become.
starts to
Becomes
become a
a
meeting
conversation.
online.
That part, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that, it's not that you can't write to Todd, but
Mhm.
it's just trying to think, is this something that I should bring to the whole council? I've just been made aware of it through emails from Todd, but what's the right venue for where I go with that?
And you can tell him he's doing a good job right here in front of all of us.
Hey, Todd, you're doing a good job.
You don't have to send, no, I mean, you don't have to send an email because, then that takes his time to read. And,
Yeah.
if everybody does that, I mean, he's spending a lot of extra time reading emails that he doesn't,
But
he's
isn't
got
it
plenty
just,
to do.
but isn't it just saying to yourself at that point, is this something we should just respond saying, is this something you want to bring up at the next meeting? And then just cut it off, right? I mean,
Right, yep, you can say, well, I'm really interested in this, or I've got some information I want to share. That's information that's factual information that Todd could be using. That's,
kind of it's a tricky balance in that, like, sometimes one of you may ask a question or respond, well, here's some more information, but that, like, the more that conversation continues and the more others join in, it starts to feel like a conversation. So I think like I'd say like the once response and my response, it should kind of stop there. And at that point, I think one of us should say, let's move this to the meeting so we can talk about it more.
I understand.
Or
Yeah.
like sometimes what I'll do is I'll get a query and I'll just say, hey, I got this note, and that kind of removes it from a conversation here. But it's hard, if there are multiple responses, it's hard for me to call 3 or 4 of you,
Right.
It's just tricky.
Understood.
So,
but I think absolutely, if there's something that comes up between meetings that you'd like to learn more about or discuss, just, let me know, let Todd know. It won't necessarily be on the agenda, but it's a heads up that it's going to be part of the roundtable, so.
And just for
wanted to
the
share that.
council's edification, I asked a lot of questions that aren't on the table. So the reason I'm asking to clarify on this is because I'm actively going and talking to the chairs of departments and Todd and stuff along those lines and getting information
That's
that way.
Absolutely fine.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. Great, okay. So, we can.
Just a
Yes,
little clarification about the roundtable, though.
we have emails.
Okay, so the roundtable, I mean, I think that there are times where there may be something like, maybe I have some follow-up questions about something that a public, a public comment that was made. I don't know that necessarily like amending the agenda to make an agenda item seems
No,
relevant.
that's-
But it may be an opinion there.
Right, so
And not
that's-
just,
Right, so that's perfect for the roundtable. I
Okay.
think that's our chance
okay,
to,
that was my
to kind of,
clarification.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and questions are good. I know we always look to Todd for a lot of answers. So, anyone want to go first? We'll start on one of these ends.
That's fine.
okay.
For the Agricultural Commission, it has not met yet, but it will be meeting on June 10th in here, 7 p.m. In that time frame, they're going to be talking about how to utilize the data they collected from the focus group and potential in regards to getting a survey draft that would have the intention of being distributed out to residents and the questionnaires in regards to support for and conditions of a cooperative agricultural community. Additionally, you got the Forum Day, August 17th, is a good thing to bring about. And I think that concludes my portion for Agricultural Commission. For the school board, they met May 15th previously, and it was a lot of talking about how awesome our robotics program is. I didn't realize how awesome our robotics program was, just like middle of the pack for the country and top tier in the Northeast, which is pretty awesome, and they've been to Worlds a couple of times. Their next meeting is June 5th at 7 p.m., and I'll have more to brief on our next engagement. But any questions, that's all I have.
Appreciate you taking on the school board. Thank you.
Question?
Sure.
So it's been my observation over many years that every year when UNH spreads manure, Mr. Hall comes in and has comments about it.
Okay.
And on several occasions in the past, we followed up on them and have spoken with the agricultural, and they've referred us to the UNH department that deals with the manure. And we've had the head of the department, who's also on the Ag Commission, come in and provide updates to the council. So I was wondering maybe if you could bring up Mr. Hall's concerns at the next Agricultural Commission meeting
Right.
and see if they have thoughts about.
Yeah, I was going to tell
The
Mr. Hall it
practices?
smells like money, but
Yeah, my understanding is UNH has best practices that they aspire to follow. I can't
Yep.
confirm whether they do or
I
not.
can try to get some
but,
documentation that points to how to effectively spread manure and from the Agricultural Commission.
I can wait till my time, because I was going to bring up the manure, I can talk about it now.
Sure.
So, last year, I was over at Boulder Field with my dog. And there's a creek that runs along, and then it turns into a little gully that sort of splits that slope area with the little field on the other side. And my dog got into that, and that it was pure shit's flurry. So I have a hard time believing that that much runoff is actually best practices. To have that come down that creek area and then down that gully to the point where it was a tough walk home, let me tell you. That mile was pure torture, and it was disgusting. I just don't believe that that runoff would be considered normal right through that water area. Just, maybe it is, but it was shocking.
Okay, so
Roger, I'll ask the question.
In the past, has someone from Public Works ever gone to look at it in person, what they've been doing? Because I think it's great to have the conversation, at the admin level, but all is removed from what's actually happening on the ground.
Rich-
Bill
she said
said
Rich-
that Rich Rain went there.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and I think I remember that discussion from a few years ago.
Yes.
We had that, I remember
Yes.
hearing about that,
Re-
but it doesn't mean they kept up with whatever
Right, so
was.
Rich has
supposed to be
gone up
correct.
and met with them, but
Yes.
I don't know what their follow-up necessarily has been. He brought concerns and ideas to their attention, and then we had a report from the head of the department that oversees it, and it's
I mean,
amended there.
if we're talking about the fields where they grow hay,
Could be
correct?
that side, there's the right-hand
And
side.
my
and the
understanding
left.
is tilling soil actually releases carbon, and it's kind of frowned on generally. And if you go like to the Midwest, there's an awful lot of no-till farming going on where they're essentially drilling seed. So that part confused me that they were supposed to till after they sprayed the manure. I guess it's liquid manure at that point. I don't disagree with it does run downhill.
Yes.
So we spend a lot of money every year on our MS4 permit that deals with nitrogen going into Great Bay.
I've argued for quite a long time that we should be monitoring the water quality at the culvert as it crosses Mill Road,
So,
because that's all pure UNH.
And as I understand it, the